Hello and welcome back to Crafted by Corie. If you're new, I'm Corie. Welcome to my channel. If you're returning, thank you as always for being here. I appreciate you so much. Super excited. We've got some more Christmas in July projects along with my take 3 on something if you've been following along. So let's go ahead and get right on into the crafting. DIY number 1. Okay, this is from the Dollar Tree. It's just a little sign, and I am going to be cutting off the top part of it. Now, it is too wide for my little miter box, that my hand saw miter box. So I am going to be using I want to call this a Sharpie, my X-Acto knife. My sharp knife. So as you can see, I'm using my square for my straight edge, and I'm just going to keep scoring this over and over again. These boards are not real thick. It's somewhere between a wood and a really heavy cardboard, I would say. I'm not even sure what it's called, but if you are patient and you just continue to score it over and over again, you will be able to cut through it. You just need to apply a little bit of pressure and just keep scoring it until you make it all the way through. This is if you don't have access to a saw. Obviously, if you have just a saw, it's really, really quick if you have a saw. But that's an option for you if you don't have one. So now I've got my piece that I'm ready to work with, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do this. My goal is to put 24 equally spaced holes across the bottom. So I broke out my measuring tape, and then I started using my calculator on my phone trying to figure out. So I'm like, well, it's just shy of 18 inches divided by 24. And I was like, well, that's not quite right because, yeah, you guys, I am visual, right? I can do basic math, but this one was really challenging me. I stuck with it for a little while and finally decided that no, I need a visual. So I pulled out some parchment paper and I decided I was going to make myself a template because I want this to look nice. I want it to be properly done. I just don't always know the means to get there. So if you have a good way to figure out how to put 24 of these little holes, across, how you calculate that, I am all ears. So at first I started creating this template. This is just parchment paper, but I did it longer than the board. And then after doing all my folds and everything else, I realized it needs to be the same size as the board. So I created a new template that was going to be the same length as my board so that as I create my folds, which I'll explain in a minute, it was going to be within the confines of the board itself. Hopefully I am making sense. So now I started folding it. I folded it in half and then I started folding it in quarters. I probably, if I'd thought about it, should have done my folds in a different way because then I realized, well, the halfway mark, because I have 24 holes I'm making, the halfway mark is going to be right smack in the middle of my, what would it be, 12th and 13th holes, right? Originally, I was thinking each crease would be the center of a hole. Well, no, that's not how this is going to work out. Each hole is going to have to be between the creases. I don't know if I'm making any sense whatsoever, but stick with me because I do finally manage to get it there. I'm just sharing all of this with you so you can see what I was doing, what wasn't working, how I was figuring this out. And again, if you have any suggestions on how I could have done this in an easier way, I am completely open to suggestions. So here I'm just counting up the number of sections that I have, and I had 24 sections. So I realized I was going to have to punch my holes in between my creases. Now I also want to make sure that they are in a straight line. So I decided I was going to go ahead and actually, I guess maybe not yet. I'm not sure what I was doing at this point. Maybe I was, oh, this is where I was thinking about punching my holes. And this is where I realized that I needed some sort of a line to keep everything even and straight. So this is where I'm going to fold up the bottom, and I'm going to fold it up about an inch. And I want to make sure that it's even all the way across because I want my line to be straight. So I am just making sure that I've got my crease going all the way across, 1 inch up, nice and straight. And it's along that crease line that I'm going to be punching my holes for my template, or at least marking it off. So I'm using my little piercing tool from the Dollar Tree, and I had it folded in half because I figured I could do, a couple of them at a time. It was getting a little bit off, so I ended up, flipping it over and going through the other side as well, and just making sure that everything was centered along that line in between my other creases. Hopefully I'm making sense. And I know you probably can't see those little holes that I've pierced, but I was able to see it on my work surface. So these were really just guidelines because, again, this is just a pattern really. And I'm going to be getting out my drill in a few minutes. And where I marked those little, I'm going to call them guide holes, that's where I'm going to be drilling. So... And you know what? I am so proud of how this piece turned out. So I hope that you're going to hang in there with me. This is a little bit more involved than some of the things that I normally do. I wouldn't say that it's difficult per se, just more involved. And it took me a little bit more time than a lot of the projects I work on. And after this one, I've got a couple of really easy ones. So just hang in there with me. So now I have a candy cane. And I have all my drill bits, and I'm looking for a drill bit that is slightly larger than my candy cane. I don't want it to be super large, but just it's going to be enough so I can fit my candy cane into the hole. Now I have this up on some pieces of wood. I don't think I showed that, but I want to make sure I'm not going to drill a hole through my table. I did kind of nick my self-healing mat there because I didn't have it quite propped up high enough, but I went and got some more wood and set that underneath the left side. I am probably not doing this in a way that is the safest, so please be safe. Don't necessarily do what I do. I probably should have had this not anchored down. What's the word I want? I don't know. Probably should have been doing it off the side of a table so that, yeah, just be safe when you do this. That's all I can say. I am doing it the way that I need to be able to show you what I'm doing with the camera. So now you can see I've got all of my 24 holes punched here. It did chew up the board a little bit. So I'm just taking my sand block and sanding that down. I was afraid it was going to completely take the finish off of the surface, and surprisingly it did not. There I was just testing to make sure that my candy cane fit through the hole, because that would have been a real bummer if it didn't. And now I'm just taking some fine grit sandpaper and going in around each of the little holes as well. So while it got a little bit chewed up around the edges, it wasn't too bad. And once I get everything cleaned up, I'm going to actually grab some Adirondack white chalk paint, and I'm going to dry brush this just to kind of clean up the hole areas, and then also brighten it up a little bit, and just make sure that the piece looks coherent. Coherent, is that the right word? Uniform, maybe? I don't know. But I definitely wanted to touch up the area around those holes. So that was the purpose of the dry brushing on this. So once I had that all set, I went over to my Cricut app on my phone, and I am just typing up Christmas countdown, and I picked out just a basic cursive font. And then I went ahead and did a whole bunch of numbers 1 through 24, and got those all set. I put them originally in the same font. Y'all, I ended up doing these numbers 3 times. and I'll explain why in a minute. But I've got my little Cricut Joy with the Smart vinyl. It's just measuring off the vinyl. I'm telling it to go ahead and start cutting, and it went to work. I love this little machine. It does such a great job. And it's just so quick and easy to use, and it tucks away in my little drawer, and it's awesome. So I cut off the vinyl, then I was cutting out some of the excess vinyl that I wasn't going to need to use because I like to save the scraps for future projects. Then I went ahead and I weeded the numbers first. I wanted to make sure that I applied the numbers to the project first, so that I would then be able to figure out where to put the Christmas countdown as far as from top to bottom goes. So weeded all of that out. And once I had this completely weeded and put it up here, I realized my numbers were going to be too large. They were not going to fit properly, especially when I got into the 20s over my holes. So that was why I redid it. The first time, I basically just made them a lot smaller. And while that was cutting, I went ahead and weeded out my Christmas countdown, got that prepped. I always find this so satisfying. I know some people don't have the patience for it. I know Annie from Annie Jones is always saying she just doesn't have the patience for it, but I actually find weeding relatively satisfying until it becomes like this. So the font that I'd used, because I made it so small now, I was struggling massively with trying to get this weeded. These, especially the ones in my numbers, they did not want to cooperate. I finally got so fed up with it. I was like, heck with it. I'm going to do it again. But I needed a different font. I needed something that could remain smallish. I mean, not super small. They were probably half an inch tall, I'd guess. But I needed maybe not even half an inch. They might have been a little smaller than that. But I needed something that was going to be chunky enough for me to be able to weed, right? So here comes the third time. Third time's the charm, right? So once that was all set, I went ahead and I weeded it, got it all ready to go, and then I was ready for my transfer tape. So just using my little weeding tool also to help me make sure that I'm poking all the numbers out and that they're laying down. Now, I opted to actually use the vinyl. I also could have used these as a stencil to paint everything onto the board. But like I said, I decided I was just going to use the vinyl letters. I don't know why I wasn't using the transfer tape at first, but there I've got my one on, and I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing all the way along the length of my board and just apply my numbers in order right above the little holes that I've drilled. So I had originally in that first attempt thought, well, maybe I could get the numbers where I needed them and just put them all down at once. Yeah, I think that would have taken a lot more calculation, because I wasn't really sure what the spacing needed to be for each number in the Cricut app. And yeah, so I was trying to keep it simple. Now I've got my Christmas countdown that is all on my transfer tape. I'm going to burnish that down and then peel that back. And again, I could have used it as a stencil and painted this on. I decided I was just going to use the vinyl itself. And now I'm going to embellish the top of it. So I have these greenery picks, not greenery, evergreen. That's what I wanted to say. These evergreen picks. At first I thought they were going to be too long. So I went ahead and I cut one of them in half. Oh, excuse me. And then I've got my little berries there. And as I was working with this, I realized that with these larger berries, the evergreen definitely needed to be longer. So like I said, I am visual. I have to see things laid out before I 100% commit to them. But I finally got it going to a place that I liked it. And that was when I decided I was good to start going ahead and securing this down. So once I have it somewhat laid out the way that I want it and where I can start kind of seeing it in my mind's eye now, I'm going to go ahead and use some hot glue to pin this down. Not pin it down, but secure it and glue it down. Clearly, I fuss a lot when I'm doing these things. Okay, Corie, enough's enough. Let's go. All right, so here I am going to go ahead and apply some hot glue. Just a nice bit of hot glue there, putting these down. I did twist these together just to try to keep them a little bit conjoined. You don't necessarily have to do it that way, but that was how I opted to do it. And now I'm going to tuck in my berries, but I decided that the picks were a little bit too long, so I trimmed that down because I don't want wires sticking out. I want everything nice and pretty and hidden. So I got the other one prepped. Got that set down. And then I do have some little gold pine cones, these little mini pine cones that I'm going to be applying to the middle in a second to cover up that center section. But first I grabbed the other two pieces that I had trimmed and I tucked those in. There was some hot glue in there that kind of grabbed them, but I'm going to be flipping this upside down once I have everything attached and just reinforce it in the back. You'll see that in a minute. So I've got these 3 little pine cones that I'm setting down. I think 2 of them were actually painted gold, and then one of them was like gold glitter. So just something to give it a little bit of bling and to add a little bit more gold, like my lettering. So here I'm just coming in and reinforcing the back of it for those 2 little pieces of evergreen that weren't 100% glued down. And just making sure that those are nice and secure. So now I have this cord. I believe this is from Hobby Lobby, if I'm not mistaken. I think I got it like 50% off or something. And I am going to secure it to either side. This is a gold cord that's also a little bit iridescent. It has like greens and reds kind of glimmering through it. It's really very pretty. But just creating a hanger for this, I had added some hot glue as you saw, but then I'm also going to grab a little piece of scrap fabric and I'm going to cut a little rectangle here that I'm going to put down over the hot glue. I've seen other people do this and I just figured it would help secure it a little bit better. I don't know if that actually works or not, but it also is hiding the end of my cord as well. So kind of just cleaning up the back, I'm making it a little bit neater, a little bit more finished, and it blends somewhat with the board itself because it's white on white. And while the board is a little bit distressed, hopefully for you guys forgive me for letting this be what is in my mind finished. So once I have that all taken care of, I decided my hanger was a little bit too long, so I'm just going to tie a little knot at the top of this. I kind of twisted it a few times to help make it easier to knot, and that is actually going to create the center of my hanger and give it a little bit more interest even. So as far as I was concerned, it was a happy accident. And that is it. Now I get to put my candy canes in, and I have my little Christmas countdown advent calendar, if you'd like to call it. But just got those all in, and this is all set. I love this so much. I hope that you do too, but let me know what you think of this one. DIY number 2. All right, this one is going to be a lot easier, but super cute, and it will be great as a little centerpiece, especially if you have a couple of little LED candles to put around it. But I have a scrap piece of burlap. I have half of a styrofoam ball. You could also use floral foam, but I liked the idea of the ball. And a bunch of glass beads to put in the bottom just to weight it down and help it have a solid surface, but also, like I said, weighted down so it's not going to fall over. This is some wired twine. No, jute cord. There we go. Wired jute cord. You could also just use regular jute cord or twine. That was originally what I was going to do, and then I decided to use this. I thought it might help make it a little easier to work with. In a minute, you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm just adding some hot glue to the ends, and then I used a piece of parchment paper to just kind of mold it around the end so that it wasn't like a big glob. I don't know. I just don't want it to unravel, because it will unravel if you don't secure the ends like that. So then I was just trying to get an idea of how this will form up around. I know that I have too much burlap for what I'm trying to do, but I wasn't quite confident in what shape I needed to create for the burlap. So instead of trying to trim it down while it was flat, I went ahead and bunched it up, and now I'm going to come back in with my scissors, and I'm just going to trim along the edges. Well, I guess I'm not doing it just yet. I'll do it now. I'm going to trim along the edges. I'm just following the same line of the burlap itself, but cutting about 2 inches off around. I mean, whatever burlap you're working with, that's going to dictate, how much you have to trim or whether it's perfect the way that it is. I would say just use your judgment. Do what makes your eyes happy. What looks good to your eye, just do that, right? It doesn't need to be perfect. Things like this are not meant to be perfect, right? So I've got my burlap all trimmed down, and now I'm going to go ahead and put my little picks into my styrofoam ball, which is obviously completely hidden. I'm just trimming these down so that there isn't too much, because I want them to settle down inside. And if I left them long, they would stick out too far, because they're just way too long, much longer than what the styrofoam ball can accommodate. So I'm just trimming these down and tucking them in. You can use whatever types of greenery or holiday decorations you want. And this is even something that you could do for the summertime, right? Obviously this is Christmas in July, so you could do any time of year. You could do something cute like this with whatever seasonal flowers you have to work with. I just think it's absolutely adorable. And now I'm just kind of fashioning a bow. I'm doing a faux bow at the front here. I'm just using the wire to my advantage and creating loops and kind of tucking it around itself so that it looks like a bow on the front there. But that's really all there is to this. And I think it is super cute, but let me know what you think. DIY number 3. Okay, this is kind of like a half of a pine cone. I've got this silver cord here that was just a scrap in my stash that I'm going to use. I just kind of cut it in half, and I'm going to create a loop. But this pine cone, I had used it last year for some other project where I think I was making acorns with it, and I was peeling all of the little, what do you call those? I was going to call it blades, petals, fronds, I don't know, whatever those little things are on the pine cone that make up the pine cone. I'd ripped a whole bunch of them off, and this was what was left. If you have a longer pine cone, that's great. If you have a different shaped pine cone, that's great. But I am going to be making an ornament out of this, and essentially we're just going to decorate the little top of it. So first I am trying to find a way to fasten my hanger on here that makes the most sense to me. So I kind of got it wrapped around what was left of the top of that pine cone, and I'm just going to secure it with some hot glue. But I really worked it into what was there on the pine cone itself. I know it's probably hard to tell on the screen, but hopefully you're gathering what I'm trying to explain. So now I have some different picks. This one is from the Dollar Tree. It's been used in a few other projects, because there's very little left of it. I just keep cutting pieces off of it for various projects. Probably for things like my minis, which will be next week. Minis challenges next week. I am so excited for that. So I hope you'll join me then as well. But just adding a little bit of these frosted berries, and then I'm going to be coming in with some evergreen in just a moment, and just putting in various different little elements to decorate the little top of the pine cone here. So I cut off a piece of the evergreen. I just bent it in half, put down some hot glue, and I'm tucking in the V part of the evergreen. And I'll just do the same thing on the other side. And this is the kind of thing that I will just continue to layer until it looks like I have enough. I don't like to overdo it, but I want to make sure that the top of this is covered, and that nothing that doesn't look quite right is showing, like the little ends of the picks or the ends of the little berry stems, that kind of thing. I like everything to be hidden, everything to be covered up, everything to just look pretty, right? And so I will continue to mess with it until I get it to that point. So this is like some little miniature pine cones. It's like a little mini pick, and I'd picked up this package of them from the Hobby Lobby a while back when everything was on sale, and just getting that situated there. And so now I'm looking at the back of this, and I'm like, oh, I can see some of that stem, so to speak. So I'm adding in some more of the little greenery. This is a piece that I had just trimmed off. And I'm going to trim off another little piece to tuck in there as well, so that the whole thing looks uniform and professional, really. I want it all to look really pretty and finished. So now I have this Dollar Tree ribbon. It's kind of like a rickrack, but it's like a red, I don't want to say sparkly. It's not sparkly, shiny, maybe. I don't know. It's super pretty. I love it. So every time I find it at the Dollar Tree, I pick it up. But I had started trying to create a bow with it, and then I decided it was going to be easier to get the look that I wanted by doing it piece by piece. So I had put down some hot glue. I made a loop. I just set down some more hot glue. I'm going to make another loop going underneath there, but I decided I needed to trim that off. So I'll add in some more hot glue once I just kind of figure out how I'm doing this here. So you can see I'm going to dab in a little more hot glue. I've got that tucked in, and then I'm going to create another loop. So you can see the start of my bow there on the left on the top of the pine cone. So I'm going to create another loop to put right in the middle. And once I have the loop on there, and I'm sorry that I'm kind of out of frame, but I created my loop, and then I'm just going to push down the middle of the loop. You'll see my loop is there. I'm adding some more hot glue there, and I'm just sticking the middle of the loop down in to create, again, a faux bow. Hopefully that makes sense, and I apologize that I ended up off screen. But now I'm going to create one more little circle, and that'll be the center of my bow and the final loop. So again, just making sure that I've got it the right size, and I'll add a little bit of hot glue to the middle there and create my loop. I wish I weren't off frame like that. I'm going to have to change my camera angle again because I am getting frustrated with myself. So I apologize for that. But once I got that last loop in, that was it. Such a sweet little ornament. I love it. I hope you do too, but let me know what you think. And now it's time for a shout out timeout. Amazing, Tammy. She hand drew all of those Grinch things. Amazing. I would love to give you a shout out as well. If you have interest, just send me an email at craftedbycorie@gmail.com. DIY number 4. All right. So a couple of weeks ago, had created this little tree, and I wasn't really 100% satisfied with how I had done it. So I had a different idea of how to do it. And the second one I did with Mod Podge, it turned out much better, but it was a hot mess in the process. And I promised that I would have another option, and you all indicated interest. So here we go for take 3 on this. Maybe the third time will be the charm. I actually did find this to be much easier, but I have my same template that I had used before. If you want to see how I created the pattern, you can check out the video from a couple weeks ago. I'll leave a link in my description box for you. But this is just regular cardstock. It's an 8.5 by 11 sheet of cardstock. And I've got a pencil here that I'm tying a string to because I wanted to have a really good curve for the base here rather than just using that template. So hopefully you saw how I did that. But I went ahead and cut it out, and now I am ready to apply my Dollar Tree scarf to the cardstock. So instead of trying to Mod Podge it, this time we are just going to use hot glue, and I'm just going to use it along the inside edges. Oh, I snipped off the point of the little thing of cardstock too, so that it has room for creating the dome shape or the cone shape. But I already lost my train of thought. But I'm using just hot glue along the inside edge, and that's going to be it. This was so much more simplified than what I had done before. Yeah, this is, of the 3 methods, this is the one that I recommend. Now, can you do it the other ways? Absolutely. I think that this turned out probably the nicest of the 3, although I really do like the Mod Podge one. I have to admit, I like the Mod Podge one and how that turned out. But this one with the hot glue, it was not nearly as messy as what I had done with the Mod Podge. So I just am going to trim off some of this excess here and just make sure that I wrap everything nice and securely. I don't want it so tight that it starts warping the cardstock, but I do want it nice and smooth and flat so that I don't have wrinkles. I probably should have ironed this before I did it, but I didn't take the time to do that. So up to you whether you do that or not. I guess I figured that with stretching it like this, it was going to stretch out the wrinkles, and it did for the most part. It definitely got them to relax. So it didn't bother me in the end, is I guess what I'm trying to say, because as we curve it here, and here I'm just really working the top of the cardstock and just trying not to create creases, but really trying to massage it and get it to curve so that I can create my cone shape. But as you pull this around into the cone, it also does stretch the fabric a slight bit more, not a ton, but a slight bit more. Once I had it lined up, I did opt to start at the bottom with the hot glue. So again, just along the seam, some hot glue to get this all pulled together. And I'm trying to be very careful not to have too much of it because I don't want it oozing out. So I'm being very sparing with the amount of hot glue that I'm using in there. And that's really it for the Christmas tree part. And now I am setting it down. I've got a wooden bead there and a dowel. It's not actually a dowel, it's the end of a skewer that I had left over in my stash, one of those really long skewers from the Dollar Tree. And I was trying to shove this parchment paper in there to support the dowel a little bit more because it wasn't quite long enough, and I didn't want to go cutting another not dowel, skewer. I didn't want to cut another one down. I wanted to use what I had. The parchment paper wasn't working, so I went and grabbed some of these little pom-poms from my stash. I grabbed a few of them thinking I'd need more than one, but one actually ended up being sufficient. So now from my little stash of bits and pieces and odds and ends, I have this tiny little circle that I am going to use to support my wooden bead for my base. And I'm going to let all this hot glue kind of drop down into the base of the hole here so that it glues it to the base, that circle. And then I'm also going to have that, I filled it pretty much. And now I'm just going to insert my skewer and let the hot glue serve to anchor that in there. And I'm just making sure that it's nice and straight. Once it was cool, I used my crimson chalk paint to give that a good coat of paint. I didn't worry about the part I was holding because it's going to be up inside of our little tree and it will not be seen. That just makes things that much easier, right? And now I am grabbing a bunch of little picks, and I have some more of those little miniature pine cones with the pip berries, and I'm just tucking them in the natural hole that was left at the top from creating the cone. And then I have this other little bow that was in my stash. I had pulled it off of some sort of little package. I don't know what it was from, but it just had a wire in it that had attached it to the package, and I just pulled the wire out. So I'm just going to be using the bow once I have all my little pick pieces in, and I will be all set with that. And the bow is just the little finishing touch. I'm just going to use a little bit of hot glue there and attach it, and then I'll be ready to put my tree on its little base, and then that'll be the end of the project. So I've got my base there, it's all dry, I'm sticking it in. I did put some hot glue in there, and then I just held it until it was cool and stable. And that is it. Let me know what you think of this one. Okay, everybody, that's it for today. If you enjoyed the project, remember to give me a big thumbs up, leave me a comment, let me know which one was your favorite. And until the next time, be well, be kind, and make it a great day. Thanks so much for watching. Take good care. Bye.